Hey everyone, welcome to Talks of Thailand. My name is Jon. Today's story is about a man who says that he was guilt-tripped into losing everything that he had in Thailand, and if he had his time again, he would do things very differently. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, give the video a like, and let's get into today's story. My story is about Thailand, I can promise you that. But it didn't start that way for me. It began with the Philippines, and before I'd even gone to the Philippines, it was a case of me meeting someone from that country in the States, who was a very Americanized version of a Filipina, hitting it off, getting together, getting married, and it was 3 years after we were married when I first went to the Philippines to go and visit where she was from. She had arrived in the States about 5 years before I met her, married to another guy who had met her in the Philippines and brought her to the States, but that relationship fell apart and she was single, and I at the time felt like I stepped in to bravely help her out in her moment of need. I'm not sure what the problem was that she faced with her ex, although it was quite clear that she seemed to be very disappointed with how things had turned out, and I, as a naive person who had no idea about anything to do with the Philippines or that part of the world or how things worked there, I chose to believe everything she told me as if it was gospel. Whereas I suppose if I had to look at her ex's opinions about things, he would have said something completely different. I didn't do that though, and when we met and got together, everything seemed to be going okay. I didn't question the fact that at the time I was 48 and she was 28. I didn't question that. It just seemed to be a natural thing for us to do. She was looking at me, I believe, as someone that she liked, and she didn't seem to care about the age. It was her who was very insistent on that it was very important to her. I didn't see that as being any kind of negative. I saw that as being a huge positive. Also, the fact that I'd never had anybody like that from my country of such an age gap, and I hadn't been in a relationship for such a long time. I didn't stop to question why this beautiful Filipina was really interested in me. I just saw that as a positive and thought I'd finally found my soulmate. Finally found the girl that I was going to be able to spend the rest of my life with, and I just looked at all the positives and overlooked any negatives that might have been there. And trust me, there were so many negatives that I overlooked, which, when I get to the end of my story, really makes me shake my head, not knowing how I managed to continuously not understand how things actually worked. When we arrived in the Philippines for the first time, I was quite alarmed about the country because I wasn't expecting to like it. I was going reluctantly because she wanted to go and see her family. She hadn't been for a long time, 8 years, I believe, 5 years with him, 3 years with me. She hadn't been for 8 years and she wanted to see her family, and she wanted to reconnect and think about the future. Because at this point, I was approaching an early retirement, because I didn't really have anything to spend money on during my life, because of the fact that I didn't have anyone to share my life with, and I just saved my money for myself. I didn't get paid a lot, but when you don't spend a lot, then I suppose that's what allows you to follow that path to early retirement, which was very important to me. I started spending a lot more money when I became involved with her, but I thought that was a price well worth paying for the fantastic time that we were living together. In the Philippines, I did feel myself liking it. She had talked before we arrived in the Philippines at length about how she'd loved to live there in the future, and how her own house by the beach. She was from an island called Samar, and although her family wasn't from the beach, it was only a short drive away. She wanted a house near the beach, overlooking the ocean, living a peaceful, relaxing life, and by the time we arrived there, she was 31 and I was around 50, and I just fell in love with the country. I started picturing myself living there. I started thinking about the whole idea of living in the Philippines and building a life together with her there when retirement came, which I thought at this point was only about 5 years away. That's the thing though, isn't it? When you understand how much more affordable things are in the Philippines, your retirement calculations are not accurate anymore, because you can recalculate for how much things cost in the Philippines, and then you realise I could have retired 5 years ago instead. And that's one of those moments where perhaps you deliberately overlook or don't think about any possible negatives that might happen by doing and making such a decision. Because the thought of being able to retire right now and not have to wake up early every morning and go to work and work hard all day, and it does take its toll on you physically, because I worked a physical job, the thought of not having to do that makes you think about living this fantastic retirement together with your wife, who you believe God gave to you. And you get to the point where after you'd been in the Philippines for about a week, you're thinking to yourself, if I don't move here, if I don't retire now, then I'm the stupid one. Because this is a life I could be living every single day. After spending a bit of time in Manila, we were down on Samar. We were staying in this little hotel which was quite close to her family's area, and I was picturing being able to do this on a daily basis, buying a car to drive around and stop off at all the sites on the way and just really enjoy myself. Ultimately, I will say, over the course of the next 3 years, we went back to the States, we sorted everything out, we moved to the Philippines, we built a house. Everything was great, fantastic, I thought. Everything started to go wrong though, and by the time those 3 years had come to an end, we had already separated, and I was back in the States looking for a divorce from her. Because when we were in the Philippines, she changed beyond recognition. The reason I didn't want to give this story as a Philippine story, I know that I really like listening to stories that happen to people in the Philippines on your other channel. Just the reason I wanted to bring this about the Thailand story, is because I didn't believe what happened to me in the Philippines was very extreme or exciting. I mean, at the time, I had a great time, but everything went wrong. But there was nothing of note that really made me think to myself that I did anything that I shouldn't have done, because it was my first time doing it. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. I didn't think I was being stupid. I didn't think I was letting myself down, because I'd never done it before. I hadn't had any friends who went to the Philippines and got married and lost money, so I didn't have any experience there. I didn't know anybody who had done it. I didn't do any research about it because I wasn't that way inclined before I met her. And also, this was approximately 2008, so we didn't have all the information available online that you can consume in order to be able to help you. The reason why I wanted to talk about what happened to me in Thailand more was because I didn't learn my lesson, and I'd seen it firsthand how things worked. And I'd started to do more research after this had happened to me when I'm in the States with my tail between my legs, not knowing what I meant to do with my life, not ready to have enough money to retire there. Because although I'd lost around $100,000 in the Philippines, I still had most of my savings left, but I was in the States filing for divorce, which came through eventually. I was thinking about what to do, and I had two options. Do I go back to work, admit defeat, work for 5 more years and retire at home? Or do I seek out another retirement destination that could be more suitable for me, that would still allow me to live the retirement that I wanted? Okay, I might not have as much money, but I should just to be able to make it work, and I kept coming back to the idea that I was already retired. I'd already experienced not working. I was already loving life to the point where nothing else mattered, that I decided I didn't have any choice but to seek somewhere else to live. The obvious choice was Thailand. I'd spoken to guys in the Philippines who spent time between the two countries, and you seem to get guys who really loved the Philippines and some guys who really loved Thailand, and you didn't really have anyone in between. A few guys, of course, liked both, but you were either one of one sorts of person or one of the other sorts of people, and Thailand started to feel like the obvious choice of places to go. I didn't just want to settle straight away for the idea of Thailand, though. I was wanting to look for other places too. And to start with, I flew down to Colombia and had a look there because it was getting more popular as time went by, and the notion of what it used to be like in the 90s and the 80s was not really how it was anymore, and perhaps it might not be as safe as places in Asia, but it appealed to me on a number of fronts. I arrived in Colombia and spent a bit of time in Bogota and a little bit of time in Medellin, and I believed it was a great place, although it just didn't feel the same as Asia. It didn't feel right for me. I liked it, but I couldn't see myself living there. I next went to Japan straight from Colombia, not because I wanted to live there, but because I wanted to see what it was like, and as soon as you get to Asia, it just feels better, and I don't know why it is. Why is it that the countries that you want to live in the most are the ones that it's hardest to live in properly? For example, in Colombia, I could have got a particular visa to live there, and by now I would have been a citizen. You arrive in Japan, you feel better, but you couldn't do that there. The same can be true when I finally touched down in Thailand for my first time there in approximately 2012. I believe this was 2008 when I arrived in the Philippines, and 2011 back in the States, 2012, yes, that was when I arrived in Thailand. And for anyone who's never been to either Thailand or the Philippines, if you want some kind of description as to compare the two, I would say, on first glance, it's a lot more modern than the Philippines. The people don't really speak English to the same degree, but obviously they do, but just not very well. The infrastructure isn't run down. Looking for the right word to use to describe the difference, it's more vibrant. I know everyone likes to use that word vibrant, but it really is. You can be driving, as I did in the taxi, looking out of the window at the Bangkok cityscape as we're approaching Sukhumvit where my hotel was, and the roads are a lot more orderly, very busy though with traffic. You're suddenly queued for hours, just as you can be in Manila. But the roads seem to be more orderly though, even though not like they are at home. They had a lot more elevated tollways, which they didn't really have in Manila. The roads weren't as potholed, although some of them were. And the buildings seemed to be, again, more orderly, but nowhere near as orderly as you'd expect somewhere like at home would be. The States is orderly, Thailand isn't, but compared to the Philippines, it is. So you've got that feeling to what it's like, and it's a bit more easy to navigate and a bit easier to comprehend as a Westerner than the Philippines is. The Philippines is great if you just want to be thrown in right at the deep end and you love the backwards nature of it. Not saying that Thailand wasn't backwards in any way, because it was. It was backwards in lots of fantastic ways. But my immediate impression of Thailand was I like this more than the Philippines. At least Bangkok versus Manila. I like this more. It wasn't overwhelming, but I just really did. Of course, when I was in the Philippines, I was there with my ex-wife who showed me around Manila. We spent some time there, and apart from that, it was just down on Samar Island, so I hadn't really done the single lifestyle, I must admit. When I first arrived with my wife before heading back to the States, I spent a couple of weeks enjoying Manila and Angeles and taking that side in, and I knew that that was available in Thailand too, because I was interested in something like that, because I was a guy, and I hadn't had any female companionship since the divorce, which I had to do in the States, which we got married in the States too, so it was easier than the Philippines. The reason I was attracted to getting involved with the nightlife scene was because I met my ex-wife in the States, and I believe that there was the very bad thing to do. I've heard other guys talking about how they met there. It could be their Filipina or their Thai girlfriend or now wife in their home country, and I believe that's one of the biggest mistakes anybody can make, because she's already experienced the West. She's already been brought there by someone from your country, therefore she's already got knowledge that you're not able to give to her, and she's able to use that to her advantage to disadvantage you. That's why I thought that going straight to the source was the best idea. Enjoying the bars would be a fantastic thing to do, to just let loose for a bit and get to know Thailand. I was going to be there for about a month before heading back to the States again and deciding what I was going to do from there. I had Colombia at this point on my list of places to retire, but I think by the time I'd spent a few days in Bangkok, the only place on my list now was Thailand, and that was good enough for me. The thing I liked most about Bangkok specifically was back then, around 2011, it was still very affordable. You had lots of different sorts of bars around. You had bars like you had on Soy Cowboy and Nana Plaza, which in a way were quite similar to the ones you had down Walking Street in Angeles. You'd also have different sorts of bars like on Soy 4 that wasn't Nana Plaza, which you could just walk in, open-fronted. There was no hidden behind closed doors, and the girls would be there, and they'd be working there, and it was a beer bar. I think that's what they're called. You had the go-go bars, the beer bars, and you also had really old-school bars, which girls still worked in too. So you had this variety of places to go to in Angeles, which compared to that was so much more. In Angeles, you didn't have that variety. I found you just had to go into those sorts of places, behind the curtain ones, and there were girls there. That's how it only was there. They didn't have any beer bars or any more relaxed sorts of places, and that really allowed me to be at one with myself in Bangkok, to get to know how things worked. I didn't want to be full in your face all the time, going into those sorts of places like they only had in Angeles. I wanted to just go for a drink and maybe chat to a girl, and the fact that that was available to such an extreme in Bangkok was something that really appealed to me. Now that I was thinking about meeting someone, that was the furthest thing from my mind. I'd been there, done that, had the problem in the Philippines, and I wanted to retire in a different place. Thailand probably was going to be it. It had already been decided by the time I was leaving Bangkok down to Pattaya. Whether it was going to be Bangkok I would live in, I didn't know yet though. But by the time I arrived in Pattaya, I was already thinking, how is it possible to get better than Bangkok? It was more affordable, again, still not cheap, but really more affordable. I loved the fact that you had the beach there and the close proximity to other islands, which I went to a little bit later, and I'll get to that soon. I just loved, again, the wide variety of bars that they had. If you wanted crazy, you had crazy. If you wanted laid back, you had laid back. If you wanted something in between, you had that. And if you wanted a massage, there was massage everywhere. If you wanted any sorts of food, that was there. It was really like the kind of place where you could do anything that you wanted within a reasonable budget. I started, although I hadn't looked for anywhere to live in Bangkok in terms of just checking things out. I thought in Pattaya I would look to see what was going on to be available to me, and I quickly found out that for between $300 to $500 a month, you could get a decent place with full facilities, a sea view if you wanted one, a high floor if you wanted one. If you wanted a house, you could have a house, anything you wanted, and I'm already deciding that based on my retirement budget, Pattaya is most likely going to be the place I would live. I met a few girls throughout my time in Bangkok and Pattaya, and one girl I met in Pattaya, which I'm going to tell you straight off, it didn't become anything serious. The fact that you were able to meet a girl and you could have her as your holiday girlfriend, and it could be like a real relationship, even though you'd only just met her, that was something that I found was great. I spent a week with her, and I went from Pattaya down to Koh Chang for a bit of time with her there, and she was just open to everything and it was fun. And the fact that she was more beautiful than my ex-wife and more exciting in every way, that made me come to the firm conclusion to offer this advice, and I believe this advice is absolutely relevant if anyone's thinking about it. Do not, and I've already said this once in my story, do not under any circumstance, if you meet a girl from Thailand or the Philippines in your own country, don't get involved with her if she's been divorced because she's not as exciting. She's not going to do the same kinds of things as she would if you met her in her home country. Because what I'm finding is when I met that girl from the Philippines in the States, she was already of the understanding of what she can get away with, like how much she can do to do the bare minimum and what the bare minimum was. In Thailand, it wasn't like that though. This girl, she was like my ex-wife times a million in terms of excitement and fun, just easy to be around. And I suppose it was that interaction I had with her that week that I spent with her, but I've already decided that Thailand was going to be where I was going to live. It was that gave me the idea that I'd just made the mistake by getting involved at home, and I should have just waited until I arrived into the country. Would I have been to the country though in the first place? That's again another thing I would like to say. I probably wouldn't have even arrived in the Philippines or Thailand if I hadn't been involved with somebody from the Philippines in the first place. So you have to look at it that way too. If I just arrived and experienced what it was, and then I went back home and met someone from the Philippines there, it wouldn't have been the same, and I wouldn't have done it. So that's very important for any guy. Don't meet a girl from Thailand or the Philippines or anywhere like that for that matter in your own country, because she's already going to be a worse version of herself. Now that that's out of the way now, I parted ways with that girl though that I went to Koh Chang with, and in a way, I felt quite upset because I had such a fantastic time with her. She was only 21 though, and I believed that was too young. I wasn't so stupid to believe that I could have someone who was that age. I was also understanding that I could if I wanted to though. I knew what would involve in terms of what I would have to make sure I could support her, but I reasoned with myself that wasn't the best idea. She'd never been to the States though, so therefore, if she hasn't seen the States, she's not going to want as much because she doesn't know that there is as much out there. That's what I was thinking. She's just going to want and be happy with basically nothing a month. I thought nothing to me, to her a lot, because back then it was so much more affordable. I have to keep saying that. Back in the States, it was a very easy decision. I was going to retire again for a second time. Okay, not with as much money as before. I had about $350,000, which I felt was a lot of money, and that went a long way in Thailand. And I was going to move to Pattaya, and I was going to begin my life there, and I was just going to live as a single person for the time being, and if I met someone, great. If I didn't, then never mind. It was going to be a great new life for me. To think about the fact that I'm writing this now from where I'm writing this from, and I'm going to give the game away, I'm not going to, it's really quite alarming to believe what had actually gone wrong. Things can go wrong, and you can make mistakes, and you can do stupid things, but at the time, you don't know that you're making them. I believe when I got on that plane to Thailand to begin retirement again, I was going to get a retirement visa and do everything like that. I believe that was the first mistake that I'd made on my second retirement attempt. The first mistake was getting on the plane in the first place. The second mistake was arriving in Bangkok, spending a week there, and believing that this was the best thing I'd ever done. Believing nothing could go wrong. Meeting a couple of guys who were already living there, and coming to the conclusion that this is really the best thing anyone could ever do. That was the second mistake. The third mistake was solidifying my time in Thailand by going down to Pattaya as planned, sorting out my retirement extension, and I believe I arrived in on a visa exempt and I changed it for the retirement visa, although I could be mistaken, but I sorted that out in Pattaya. I rented a place to live, and once you've got your place to live, once you've got the visa, which probably, let's call it a month after I'd arrived in the country, once you've got the bank account sorted out, that's when you feel like you've cemented your place in retirement in the country, and you develop your routines that you need to do in order to maintain life there. Transferring a certain amount of money in every month, spending what you need to spend, perhaps opening up a separate account where you put little bits of money in to save just to go on vacation. That's what I was doing over the first 6 whole months of me being there, spending time in the bars, meeting the girls, having great times with them, yet never anything serious happening. After 3 months, I went down to Koh Chang again because I really loved it there. The first time, I took a girl with me because when I was there the first time, I just saw that was what they needed to do. But this time I didn't, because I saw that there were lots of bars there, so I thought I could meet a girl there, which I did, and we had a great time, and I left, because there was nothing that gave me any feelings of connection to remain with her, but I had a great time with her anyway, and I'm back in Pattaya after that time went by. It was about 6 months after I'd arrived in Thailand when I decided I was ready to do a full exploration of the country, a full explore to see what the rest of the country was like. I'd always been into riding bikes in my life, I'd always had bikes, and I was missing it, because that's one thing I did every weekend, is to go out on the bike, even if it was just 50 miles, go out and enjoy the roads. Come rain or shine, I was doing it. So I decided to go and buy myself a bike. I didn't want a scooter or a push and go or anything like that, which most people seem to have. I wanted something decent, and I ended up with a CB500 Honda, which was okay, it did the job. Not as powerful as I was used to, but again, it was Thai roads. I didn't want to do anything too extreme because I'd witnessed quite a number of accidents since I'd arrived. I had my head switched on though, and I knew how to ride. I got my Thai driver's license, which was pretty straightforward, and about 6 months in, I set off on my adventure. I was going to be spending a month on the road, something I was really looking forward to do. I was going to go all the way up north, up to Chiang Mai and all the way back again. I was going to be going through the Isan region because when you're in Thailand and you're in the bars and you're loving the bars and you're spending time with girls, you realise that most of them come from there. And I'm not going to lie, I had this feeling inside me like perhaps I could meet a girl right at the source. Thailand was the source, but Isan was the real source. Perhaps I could meet a girl where she was from. Not for anything long-term, relationship-wise, but for something a bit more fun. Perhaps before she'd been corrupted by Pattaya, or before she'd been corrupted by Bangkok or whatever else you go to meet tourists. Perhaps that could happen, and I was secretly thinking that it could be the case. I can remember setting off from Pattaya. I had the 2 boxes on the side with all my stuff in, a proper helmet, gloves, everything, so you didn't get burnt by the sun. I headed up east to start with, or northeast. Didn't want to go through Bangkok. Before long, after I'd been riding for a couple of hours, I got to Sak Kiao, which is quite close to the Cambodian border. I don't believe that's Isan yet, but that was my first time out of the tourist areas, and I was going to be spending a night there. I can remember walking around looking for bars and not really seeing any. Again, it wasn't a tourist location. On the other hand, you had lots of Thai places, and it was a very interesting experience, and so far though, I hadn't met a girl, and although that's something I was hoping to do every day, it didn't work out in Sak Kiao. Then I set off the next day and arrived in Buriram. I was going to be spending 2 days there, and well, I really liked Buriram. That's where most of the girls I'd met came from. On average, not most as in all, but some. And it just had to be like I work out averages. Probably met 5 or 6 girls from Buriram. I suppose the mistake I made was gravitating towards the few little bars that they have in Buriram that expats hung around in, which obviously meant that the girls that worked there were already well in tune with foreigners. Again, it didn't seem to be as extreme or over the top like Pattaya was though. And I was in this little bar in Buriram quite close to the water. Not the sea, I mean, because there's no sea there, but the water that you see in Buriram, quite a big piece of water, and it was apparent that this was an expat place, and there's a girl working there who, she wasn't a 10 out of 10, but she was just my kind of girl in every way. Before long she comes over after I've had a drink and she gets one, and we're having a chat, and I love the way that it just wasn't a busy place. There were a couple of guys in there when I arrived, and then they left, and then it was just me and her, and 2 other girls working, and we're talking to each other like you do. Before long, we agreed that we could leave together, and I felt this urge, though, that taking her for the rest of this bike trip with me would be a really good idea. I really did feel like that. I really did feel like taking her with me would be the best thing, because again, I met her in Buriram, I didn't meet her in Pattaya, and therefore it felt like she wasn't as spoiled as the girls who had already been to Pattaya or Bangkok or wherever. Although it was a bar where expats hung around in and foreigners hung around in, wasn't the same, or I didn't think it was. And I thought if I could take her with me, that would wow her because she could see things that she hadn't seen yet, and I don't know what it was. She was 25 though, which I felt was just perfect for me. I always thought you've got to half your age and a little bit more to have the perfect gap, and this was perfect. And I kind of asked her, would you like to go around Thailand with me? I've got the bike. I showed her my bike, and she was really saying that's great, how fantastic the bike was, telling me it looked fantastic. She said she'd love to. You've got to give some money to the bar if I don't work for a month, and I was saying a month, and what do you mean? Well, I work there, and you'll have to give them 7,000 baht, and I thought, well, that's a bit of a downer. Then I thought, why not? So I agreed and gave her the money. This was in the evening around 9 p.m, and about halfway through that, I got coming back and thought, well, if she doesn't do that, then that's another lesson, because she'd already gone with that money back to the bar, and I was thinking she wasn't going to come back. Thinking it's not a fortune, though, but an hour later she is back, with the bag, saying she can't wait to go, and it was a bit of a shock. I mean, I had agreed to give her some money for the trip. I think it was 20,000 baht to go on the trip with me, because I knew she wouldn't be able to work, and therefore it wouldn't be fair to take her away from work, and she wouldn't have money to pay for her obligations. Perhaps she was attracted to that reason too. I mean, obviously. She arrived back, though, and I'm thinking to myself, is this really a good idea? Part of me is looking at her and thinking, yes, it definitely is. What happened by the time we left Buriram and stopped off in a number of other East End towns, then we headed up into the north, into Thailand, into Lampang, spent a bit of time there, which I quite liked. Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, Mae Hong Son, Tak on the way back down, Bangkok, Pattaya. I'm pretty tired though after this. What had happened during that trip was me feeling like I'd finally met a girl in Thailand that I felt was something more than any girl that I'd met in Thailand before. She was very different to the girl that I met in the country who was from the Philippines, who everything went wrong with, and I was looking at everything that she did, and I was comparing her to my ex-wife, should I say, from the Philippines, because that's the only thing I could think of doing. I had to be able to compare. If I didn't compare the situation I'm talking about, I'm not referring to her as if it was just compare the situation, it would have made it more sense, I think. I don't know what I'm trying to get across here. This is the reason why I wanted to talk about what happened to me in the Philippines to start with, because I believe that at the time, I'm talking about not looking back, but at the time, I believe that gave me the understanding that I was going to make less mistakes by doing it this way. Because I'd been through mistakes before, I'd lived through those mistakes, and I'd done stupid things. Now I'm not going to do stupid things anymore, because I knew what to look out for. And I'm looking at this girl that I'm with throughout the entire month of that, feeling like I really do like her. I'm looking at her, and I'm comparing her to my ex, and every comparison is a positive one in her favour. The way she looks, the way she behaves, the way she doesn't seem to nag, the way she doesn't seem to want for much, the way she just seems to be happy if you're happy, the way she seems to want to do what you want to do. Everything about it was a score for her. If you had to give each person a mark out of a particular score, or you had to choose which person got a particular point, if there were 1,000 points to give out, she would have had 100 of them, and X would have had 0. That's how I'd come to the conclusion, and I was starting to think that what happened to me in the Philippines was a positive, because it gave me the understanding that I wasn't going to have that problem again. And again, I'm just setting myself up for complete destruction by being such a fool, because I didn't realize I was being a fool. I thought I was doing everything right. When we were in Pattaya, though, she was saying she needs to go back to work. She was insinuating that she didn't really want to, and she wanted to stay more with me, but she didn't want to openly say that, and I could see what she was doing. And when she was saying that, I said, well, why don't you not go back to work? Why don't you just stop and stay with me, and we can go away together? I wanted to go to Cambodia because I hadn't been there yet, and I was looking forward to doing an overseas trip. I half wanted to go to the Philippines again, but half didn't because of what had happened there, and I said to her, would you like to go to Cambodia with me? Just completely quit working, and how about we have 1 more month together, and after that, if you want to go back to work, you can. If you don't, then we'll stop. You can stop working completely, and we can be together. I was really wanting this, and she said yes, she'd like to do that, but it was going to be me paying the bar another 7,000 again for her not to work, and it felt like something that was ruining the illusion, I suppose. But I just pushed that to the back of my mind as hard as I could, and just handed the money over as if it was for something completely different, and I accepted it for what it was, because it did make it worse, but I thought it was fine. It shows you, though, what little she knew about life and how little she knew about anything, because the idea was to go to Sa Kaeo and Aranya Pratet, close to the Cambodian border, and go into Cambodia that way. Of course, this was a long time ago, before they had all these problems that they're having today, where they wouldn't be a good idea. So I dropped off at the bike at this hotel on the high side about 5 kilometers away from the border, paid them a bit of money to look after the bike, and we got the tuk-tuk to the border. I hadn't thought to ask her if she had a passport with her or anything like that. I just thought it was so obvious. We're going to a different country, you need a passport. We arrived at the border, though I've got my passport, I'm about to get stamped out, but before I do, luckily, the Thai queue was a lot shorter than the foreigner queue, and she comes over and said, I don't have a passport. I asked her, what do you mean by you don't have a passport? Oh, I don't have a passport, I can't go. Then I'm thinking, what a crazy thing to do. The thing is, when I'd got over the initial shock of what happened, and we were back at the hotel where we were, I decided to stay for a night to just think about what to do, where the bike was parked. When I got over the initial shock, I actually saw that as being one of the most fantastic things to ever happen. Because she didn't know anything about the world, she didn't know anything about anything, and because of that, I was really attracted to her, because I thought, well, it's not really a problem, we can get her a passport, and we can go again soon. I was really attracted to the fact that she didn't seem to know anything about the world, and she didn't seem to know anything, and because of that, it's like I could mold her in my own image. I could show her the ropes, I could show her things, and I could teach her things, and I could be the guy who opened her up to a different world, and I was even thinking about taking her to the States because of that. Again, I wasn't going to do that really, but just thinking, because of this and how it happened, I was really drawn to the fact that she didn't seem to know much, and because she didn't know much, it made me feel like I was someone who could give her experience that she'd never had before, and that she would really respect me for and love me for even more because of it. So I looked at the fact that we'd arrived at Cambodian border and she didn't have a passport because she didn't know she needed one. I looked at that as a very, very good thing, because it was a good thing. It was a fantastic thing for her to not know about anything, and therefore I was able to be the guy who could lead her in life. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I was feeling, and I stayed the night at that hotel, and then it was, we need to go to Buriram to get her a passport. And things went very quickly from there because we're already talking about this. So we arrived in Buriram, went to the passport office. She didn't have any of the paperwork that she needed to get it. She had her ID card, but she needed the house book. I believe that's what it was called, and it wasn't long to get a passport after she got that. You could pay to get one quickly, and it would involve going to her family's house to get the paperwork, and I was actually quite excited to go to her family's house. After we left the passport office, got the bike, I said to her, let's go. But she said, no, you can't go because my family doesn't know I have a boyfriend. And she called me her boyfriend for the first time. And that was exciting, and it felt really great. What do you mean? How do your family not know? My family don't know that I work in that bar before. My family don't know anything. I just tell them that I do something else. My family don't know I have boyfriend. Well, fantastic, I said. Now is the perfect time to tell them. Let's go, and let's get introduced. But she said, no, in Thailand it doesn't work like that. She said if I go to see you there, or if you go there with me, you have to be married to me or have to tell my family we will get married, otherwise they will lose face in the village. She didn't say it directly like that, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I've never heard anything like this before. Again, it's not like I hung out with many people in Thailand, or other foreigners that is, and when I did, it wasn't a huge topic of conversation about the intricate knowledge and workings of a Thai village. Somehow, I just said to her, and again, I wasn't thinking I actually wanted to get married, but I thought, well, no problem. Let's just get married. Let's just tell them that we're getting married. We can get married in a few months. I thought that was something we would tell them, to not actually get married in that time frame, but we could tell them we were doing that so that they could feel happy, and I was happy to play the part. She looked at me as if to say, really, you want to get married? And I said, yes, sure, again, thinking it was just to play the part, and I don't know what it was. Perhaps she was just latching on to the fact that I appeared to have more money or whatever, but I didn't think she'd want to get married to me after knowing me for such a short amount of time. But she said, okay, great, let's get married then, and she was really happy about it. Again, we really did hit it off. We really did appear to be in love with each other. I was in love with her, and she seemed to be in love with me, and now I had unwittingly agreed to get married, believing that it was just a ploy to tell her family that we were getting married, but we weren't really. Obviously, I was completely deluded as to what was going on. Because of that, she calls her family before we arrive, saying she's got something to tell them. She was really enthusiastic about it. I couldn't tell what she was saying, but I could tell the enthusiasm, and I thought, just go with it. Just enjoy yourself. You're in retirement. You're here to have a good time, so go with it. So we find that an hour later we're on the bike going to the village, and she's directing me, and we arrive at this really small village, really different to the city, and her family's there, and it wasn't just her mother and father. It was her mother and father, a couple of siblings who were a bit younger than her, and it was everyone, like her aunt and uncle and cousins. Everyone had come around, and it was really a bit of a shocking experience. I mean, I'd seen things like this in the Philippines, but this was different in Thailand. Well, I found anyway, and they're all around and they're welcoming me. One of them spoke a bit of English and said, you're going to get married, that's great, that's really great. It was, I suppose, at that moment when I felt a little bit guilty, because I thought we both, me and her, didn't have any intention to get married, and it was just something for us to be able to go and visit the family. That's what I was expecting. It appeared that her whole family were really excited by this though, and perhaps they were already counting the money that I was going to pay, which I didn't think at the time I was going to do, because I didn't even know something like that existed. When we were leaving, after she'd got the paperwork that she needed an hour later, I thought that was interesting, that was an experience. I never thought I would see them again, never thought I would see them again, that is so important to say. That's what it was though. Back in Buriram for a few days, she gets the passport, and we went to Cambodia as planned. From Phuket, we headed to Siem Reap, which was fantastic. I loved Angkor Wat, once-in-a-lifetime experience. Down to Phnom Penh, great city, and I was loving it. Sihanoukville, I thought was great at the time, then back up to Phuket, back on the bike, back down to Pattaya, and it was about time to think about what was next. And I said to her, because this was supposedly the time when she was meant to be going back to work in the bar again, I said to her, I don't want you to go and work in the bar. She looked at me like, of course I'm not going to work in the bar. I hadn't caught on yet, and I said, well, how about you live with me? She looked at me like, of course I'm going to live with you. Again, I hadn't caught on yet, so I was happy that she was going to be living with me, and we were just living life from that moment in Pattaya. It was only a few days later when she said something. At this point, we'd committed. I believe I'd committed. I was happy to commit because I really, really, really did like her. I loved her, in fact, and I was very happy in her company. I committed to being with her, and I believed it was just going to be slow and steady from there. It was only a couple of days after we'd arrived in Pattaya when she said, all my family are asking, when are we going to get married? I looked at her and had a bit of a laugh, saying, maybe in a few years. Then she looked really upset. No, we tell my family we're going to get married. I said, yes, we did. We told them so that we're getting married so I could go there. I didn't necessarily think it was going to happen. And then she said, what do you mean? That was when it hit me that the little family situation wasn't what I was thinking it was. I thought it was just a ploy to be able to go and see them. Even though technically it wasn't going to be possible, just because we agreed to get married, it would, and it would actually be us getting married. And if we did, it might be in a few years' time. That's what I was thinking if we were still together. Now I'd understood that to her it was a commitment to marriage, it was a commitment to her family, and it was a brand new thing that I had no idea about I was doing. And I could see the look on her face as if to say, don't you dare tell me I took you to see my family and you're not going to get married to me soon. I said to her, let's just sort it out, just trying to calm things down before things got out of control, because I could see them getting out of control quickly. And I said, we'll sort it out. I've just got to get some paperwork from back at home, and that could take a month or two. So just tell your family it's in the works and everything will be okay soon. It just takes time because I'm not from here. And I came up with this story, and because she didn't really know anything about anything, she believed me. So the fact that she did believe me, and things calmed down a bit. I think I actually went out by myself after that, and I remember sitting in the bar, or this bar, and I wasn't talking to any girls or anything. I was just sitting at the bar, and I'm really going into this guilt trip into getting married. That's what it felt like. I'm asking myself the question, am I really going to get guilt tripped into getting married? I didn't feel guilty about doing what I did with the family, though. I thought we were doing it together. I thought we were in on it together. I thought it was a ploy together. I thought it was a fun thing that we were doing together, just for me to be able to go. And she wanted me to go, and she didn't want to get married and rush into things, though. That's what I thought. It appeared that that's what we were doing, but she took it absolutely literally, and I didn't. And again, I'm telling myself, am I about to get guilt-tripped into being married? As much as I love her and as much as I want to be with her, surely I should spend more time together with her first. But am I about to do this? I promised myself, no, put your foot down, and say, if we're still together in a year, we can get married then. And I had a couple more beers, went back to the place, and she's looking very happy because I talked about getting married. She said I spoke to my family saying that they're waiting for paper and it will be soon, and instead of putting my foot down like I promised myself, I just said, great, fantastic, I can't wait. Then we went about the rest of the evening, and I'm lying there in bed thinking, never mind, just do it, just get married. What's the worst that could happen? I suppose one thing that's really difficult is the fact that she didn't know much about anything to do with anything. The fact that she didn't even need a passport to leave the country, the fact that I was telling her everything about everything. How is it that things went so much worse, and how did she manage to do what she did? That's what I don't know. My stupidity, probably. But again, now I'd agreed to get married, even though I didn't want to. Didn't want to get married for a while, but I didn't want to have her have any problems. I didn't really think about that. I just thought it was fun, innocent little thing that people did. Again, I was very wrong. I mean, I know I was wrong. I could have put my foot down and nothing bad would have come of it, but I might not have been with her. I could have looked out of my window in Pattaya and the condo I was in, looked in every direction, and although you couldn't have directly seen any girls, there would have probably been 1,000 girls within eyesight, within eye line of where I was standing, and I could have been in a relationship if any of them if I wanted to have been. But at the time, you don't see it that way, do you? You see what you're doing instead, and what you shouldn't do, which is what I was doing. What I was doing is what I wasn't or shouldn't be doing. Then I found myself arranging getting what I need to be able to get married. Reluctantly, but I'm doing it. And she's always insisting on it, and it was only 2 weeks later when I had all the paperwork, somehow believing that something would happen to stop it. Like, you can't do this because you don't have this paper, or you've got to fly back to the States to get it, and she's going to say, I don't want you to leave. I don't want you to go back to the States. Nothing like that happened, though, and I'm there, ready to get married. I didn't even know about the whole village side of things, and again, probably very naive because so many guys go through this. I didn't know about Sinsot, didn't know about anything. When I told her I'm ready to get married, thinking she's going to change her mind or she's going to back out of it, but she didn't. I'm not stopping it too, though, because I have to say that I'm happy with her. That's the thing that made me do it, I suppose. I am really having a good time with her. I'm having my wildest dreams come true with her, so it's not like I'm not happy. Again, it just seemed to be too soon, though, for me. We headed back up to Buriram on the bike. I loved riding with her. That was great, the way she'd just grab onto me, and it was great, it really was. Back in the village, then I'm introduced to all the Thai custom, which I later learned are probably all nonsense, given the fact that she worked in a bar and did things like that. Given the fact that she wasn't brand new, given the fact that she was a little bit older than she would have been if she should have had Sinsot. And Sinsot isn't something that you should pay as a foreigner in Thailand unless you meet a girl who is brand new and who is whatever she is. Even still, it didn't work that way because you're not going to be living in the family's house, are you? You're not going to be getting the family's house, so you shouldn't pay Sinsot at all as a foreigner. I didn't know that at the time, though. And I didn't choose to do any research because I just found myself cornered when I was asked for 300,000 baht plus the cost of the wedding, and she insisted. And it's just how it happens in Thailand. This is just how it works. I was alarmed because I felt that was a huge amount of money, just under $10,000, plus it was going to be 3 to 4,000 for the wedding itself, and I was cornered. I was cornered into the back corner of whatever corner you want to talk about, and I felt like I had no choice. Again, guilt tripped into agreeing to it, even though I didn't necessarily want to, but I did. When can we get married, thinking hopefully it's going to be in 3 months and something will happen to cancel the wedding, because I don't have to give this money then. Then I'm thinking and talking together, and they said, what about 2 weeks? All I'm doing is saying okay, just to get it out of the way. And we eventually got married during those 2 weeks. Did everything that was expected of me, or scammed out of me, I would like to say, because I shouldn't have had to pay because she wasn't brand new. I paid though, we did that, got married, and now we have a marriage certificate, and I'm married to her, and again, it's not like I was unhappy with her. I was happy with her. I felt like we were good together, and I felt like she was a girl I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. But even still, I just felt like something was amiss somewhere, something was wrong somewhere, and it was a bit too soon. We were married now though, and okay, let's go away on a honeymoon and let's look forwards, and we decided to go back to Cambodia. I really liked it there. She said she liked it, although looking back I don't think she did. I just think I liked it a lot. We spent a bit of time in Phnom Penh, which wasn't necessarily your typical honeymoon destination, but even still it was great and I enjoyed it. Back in Pattaya, then it was like nothing had changed. We were married and nothing had happened to ruin the illusion of what we had at that moment, and I believed everything was going well. One of the things that they say though is that if you marry in Thailand, you marry the whole family, and I hadn't understood that yet because when I'd met her, up until the point we were married, it was just me and her, and I was giving money to her. What she was doing with that money, I had no idea. She could have been sending some of it to her family, or a lot of it to her family, or all of it to her family, and I suppose that didn't really matter to me, because it was just one amount. It was never talking about the family or the family struggles or the family's problems or anything like that. That wasn't my problem. I'd already given them some money, which meant that it was, as far as I was concerned, enough. As far as they were concerned, though, that was just the opening bid. That was the opening payment. That was a down payment to what was going to be more expected funds coming from me, which at the time I had no idea about. The first time it happened, which was after we'd been in Pattaya probably, and this is no hint of a lie, 2 days after we'd arrived back from Cambodia, it was something to do with needing some fertilizer for some crops, something along those lines, and it was 10,000 baht. And the first thing I said was, why don't they pay with their own money? Why is this my problem? She just kept saying to me, family, family. And what about family? I've given them that money. Why don't they use that? No, that's different. So I gave them 10,000 baht thinking it's going to be a one-off. The problem is it wasn't a one-off. A week later, it's the tractor needs a repair, not a proper tractor. You know those red tractors that they push along, sort of got like an engine on it with 2 wheels at the front and you push it. That needed repairing and that was 15,000 baht. I'm fine, I'm paying for that too. The thing that I suppose allowed me to continue giving little bits of money for the next 6 whole months was the fact every time she would ask, she would see I was a little bit upset, but I would agree, then she would blow me away, behaving even better than I'd ever seen her behave, just as if to say, I'll always be perfect for you. And I suppose I didn't have time to sulk or be angry about giving this money because of how she was as soon as I gave it, and she was doing that to her advantage, and she was really doing a good job for herself because of it. When you're only giving a little bit of money here and a little bit there, you don't necessarily think about it. When you take time to actually look at what you've spent and you've given probably $10,000 extra, that's when you have to push back and say, no, this is crazy. Then what happens when you push back is, okay, my family will have a problem, and I promised them this already, and okay, then you have to find that you're giving some more money. When you give it this time, she's not behaving in the same way now. She's just back to normal now because she was so not normal when you didn't give it to her. Now she's just back to normal, and you're not getting anything for the money that you've given. And it's because of that that you completely decide to continue to just give as and when it's required. I suppose what happened next is when we were actually up visiting the family the next time, which was a few months later, after the number of months I'd been giving money, and it was probably $15,000 at this point, I had a conversation with her saying, I've got a certain amount of money. What about if I just give them one amount of money and that's it, and they're never allowed to ask for money again? Can we arrange something like that? I want to be able to help, because I didn't necessarily not like to help. Helping them and making them okay was okay, but I didn't want to do it negatively. I didn't want it to negatively affect me. So what happens if I just give them one amount of money and that's it? Maybe 200,000 baht and let's call it forever. And I asked her to go and approach her family, and would that be fine? And I agreed to do that, which meant all in, I was just over $20,000 extra out of pocket, which was taking a hit of me. But it was still okay financially, I thought I was, and I thought that would be fine. And the fact that they accepted that, I thought it was all agreed and all set to go, and I was happy to do it because I never expected it to happen again. And the thing is, nothing happened for a whole month. No asks for money for another month after that. Then another month. So 3 months had gone by, and I'm living with her. And we're just how you want to live a life. Wake up in the morning, go out for something to eat, come back, lounge around a bit, go out for something to eat in the evening, and enjoy life. This went on for a few months, a few more months, and a few more months. Then we go up to see the family again, and she's talking to them, and I can tell some things are probably a bit off. She came to me and said, I know you told me that this one was the last one. I know this, I know, and I'm sorry, but my family keeps telling me to ask. They keep telling me that they have, I can't even remember what it was, a problem, and could I give them 25,000 baht? That was when I just completely lost my cool. What do you mean? I said. I can't give them any more money. We already agreed. Her family is looking quite alarmed, as if to say, why are you doing this? Why is he having a problem? I quickly had to calm down because I didn't want to cause too much of a scene. And I said I don't really want to give them any more money because I've already given them some and it's going to affect my retirement if I keep doing this. Eventually, though, I just had to give them the money because again I felt guilt-tripped yet again, and it got to the point where I started having these little doubts about things. The 200,000 baht, did she actually tell her family that? Or did she keep it and just give her family money as and when they asked for it, hoping it would last a lot longer than it did? Perhaps that was a thing I didn't know at the time and that was what happened. That's what I was starting to think. The problem was, when she's not asking for money, when her family's not asking for money, we're very happy. I'm happy with her, and life's great. Life is what I want life to be. And that's the big problem. I'm happy, but I'm not happy to be handing money over. And she can tell that, and she doesn't care to stop, though, asking. She will not stop asking, and let's say it drags on for a bit longer. By the time I'd lost about $50,000 to the family, over another number of years, it got to the point where I couldn't afford to do it anymore, and I was doing it because I was just keeping to maintain the peace. I was guilt-tripped, and I was just trying to make everyone okay. When I refused, point blank, I refused a few times, but then I caved in, but this time I couldn't give in. $50,000 lost, and okay, many years have passed and we were okay for most part, didn't build anything or do anything like that, but I'd lost about $50,000, and that was it, well, a case of getting divorced, which we did. I couldn't believe it though, because I was just guilt-tripped into losing all that money. It was really heartbreaking though, because when you get divorced and you see what had happened, then you realise it. I've lost $50,000 and it wasn't everything yet, and I kept saying that because it was just crazy. It was really upsetting time for me because that money had gone. With what I'd spent so far, I still had a decent amount of money left, and getting divorced again was just leaving me empty though. I was feeling I wasn't happy anymore, I was miserable, and it wasn't easy to get divorced, and yes, I had to give her some more money to agree to it, but she seemed to not care. It was just one of those things, and that's when you start to think, was I wrong, and did I find the wrong person? I mean, I did find the wrong person. The only thing that would make me happy was going to the bars, which I did, and I met another girl about 2 months after I got divorced, and this one was just a typical sort of thing, which is why I didn't want to pay too much attention to it. I just wanted to talk about how I was guilt-tripped into doing what I was doing. That was where most of my misunderstanding and most of my knowledge went. What happened next was I met someone, she made me feel better again, and she made me feel happy again, and I agreed to get married to her after about 3 months of being with her. This time, she was from Udon Thani, and I knew the game before I went in, and I was able to do things the way I thought. The reason I did what I did was because I was able to tell her, I'm not going to pay money, I'm not going to give money to your family, I'm not going to do anything. That's not what I'm here to do. I can't do that. I was telling her then, so if you ask me for money or anything for your family, I will never give it to you, and we will not be staying together anymore. That's it, and that's why I told her, and she promised, and she would never do that, and I believe that's why I thought this was different. Also, the fact that she was 38, which seemed to be a much better age position between us, although, again, 25 was my perfect age in terms of excitement and fun, but in terms of sensible, she seemed to be more sensible. So I agreed to get married to her, and the family was different. They didn't want sinsalt, they didn't want anything, they just seemed to be happy that she was happy, and we built something great over the course of about a year, to the point where I was just happy again. I was really happy again, and I was thinking back to my last wife and how things went wrong with her, and it was a mistake from the start getting involved with someone so young, but now things were great, or so I thought. That's why when it came to the idea of building a house in her area and going to live up there for a more peaceful retirement, I jumped at the idea because I saw a new life. I saw something fun there, and I saw something great there. I invested quite a lot of money in some land and another house. My second time building, the first time was in the Philippines. We moved in, and then the guilt trip starts. The guilt trip started, it really did, and her family was starting to want money. She'd allowed me to believe that she was different to the point of investing my money into a house. Then her family wanted money. Now I'm so heavily invested in the area that if I don't, things could go wrong. It took 2 years for my money to finish and run out, and I was guilt-tripped again into giving money, and I was pressured and manipulated into doing so for a third time. This time, though, there was no coming back, and I had to leave and return to the States a broken man. I had about $10,000 with me, and that's where I remain today, not happy in life. All I wanted was happiness. All I wanted was to be with someone. The reason I wanted to spend most time talking about the girl who guilt-tripped me in the first time was because it plays on me today. I suppose she was the most special girl for me. If I think back, she was the best girl. I loved her so much, and I would still be with her now if she was just with me and there was no money involved. The girl I married after that, older and more suitable, made me happy again, and made me able to live, and it made me able to do what I wanted to do. Yet she just played a small part of my life, even though I invested more money with her, and I ended up with nothing anyway. The girl who I met in Buriram, she was just special, and she was my number one, and I still wish I was with her. I suppose I really do. Even though I wasn't with her, and I lost money after that, she was the love of my life. I have to come to the conclusion, though, that I'm not good with women. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work for me, because I see things and want things in a particular way that isn't real and isn't going to happen. And when I do things because I feel guilty if I don't, and I suppose that's where I want to leave it. Meeting a girl from the Philippines took me to Asia. Getting divorced with her took me to Thailand. Meeting that girl who blew me and made me do things I would never have done because I felt guilty for not doing them. I felt guilty for agreeing to get married when it was just meant to be a game. Then guilt-tripped into giving her family, my second Thai wife's family, money because if I didn't, she would have a problem in the village now that we built a house. Apparently, because we'd built a house, that's why money was due to them. I didn't know what it was. Thailand, beautiful girls, beautiful country. Unfortunately, they're all too real though, and that's the thing. You believe that you're living a fantasy. You believe that the girls are a fantasy, but they're real. They're real people. And remember, if you don't remember that, if you don't think about that, that's when you can lose. I lost because I thought I was living a fantasy. And the reason I didn't believe my Philippines wife was a fantasy was because I met her in the States. I talked about her because I met her in the States. And because I met her in the States, she'd already been drawn to the ways of the West, therefore it wasn't a fantasy in the same way. Going straight to the source, ideally in Thailand and up in Buriram, gave me the illusion that I was doing something different. I thought I'd already learnt from my mistakes, but I hadn't. Then, meeting someone older, telling her everything and insisting on everything and how it was going to work, made everything worse, because I believed that she agreed with what I said. And as soon as we built the house, that's when it all went wrong. All I would say to anyone going to Thailand is, don't get guilt-tripped into losing all your money.